So what I was thinking about lately is of course, my obsessive thinking, about just that, about the letting go of the shore and letting the water carry you, but about floating into the mystery. So if you were like to dive into the mystery, it wouldn't be the same because then we would be doing something, right? If we were drifting into the flow, into the mystery, it seems like we'd be kind of lost and not aware, kind of unaware of what was happening. But if we're floating into the mystery, that's a surrender. That's like a surrender with trust. Does anybody else have a really hard time when somebody tells you to just let something go? Oh, just let it go. Whatever that crap is, just let it go. Yeah. It's like,
I'm agreeing with
yeah, as if I could let it go, you wouldn't be hearing about it right now. Really? It's like, oh, it's so frustrating. So when I'm sitting with somebody who's having a hard time letting something go that I know is not serving them, that's the last thing I suggest. Because it's hard for us to even imagine letting something go. Even if we were willing to surrender it, who or what are we surrendering it to? When you have to have some kind of trust or faith that there's something there that you're floating into, that you're letting go of into, So what is that mystery? Eric Butterworth, in The Flow of Life, his book, which is amazing, he's a New Thought author and Unity minister, describes in his book that the mystery is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So try to wrap your brain around that one for a minute. So let's repeat it. A sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere.
That's God.
Exactly. So, a sphere whose center is everywhere, so that must be omnipresence, right? And if it's everywhere, then it must be where I am and where you are and where we all are. So sounds like we then are the center of God. Are we the point of light and life that presents everywhere? He goes on to say that every point in this sphere, which is God, is thus a bubbling forth of the infinite flow of life. He then asks, what is this one that we call God? Definitely not one that's far off somewhere ruling the universe in what he describes as an absentee landlord. I love that. You guys would know all about that, right? Yeah. But it is the one, the whole of things, the allness of which and in which we are an eachness. I love that too. He proposes that no matter what we think we are the flowing forth of the one. The flowing forth of the one. We are unique and different on the surface, and there cannot be any other eachness quite like we are individually, and yet we have no existence outside the whole. He then states that our eachness can never be separated from the allness, which is God. So my favorite visual of this concept, in which we have used here before several times, is the wave in the ocean. So, God in me, like the ocean in a wave. I in God, like the wave in the ocean. So the wave is an expression of the ocean. It's an activity. It does not need anything from without itself to be in full expression. It just allows the ocean to move it into being. Thus, we do not need anything from without to be in our full expression of life. Everything we experience comes from within. We live from within out. Our life is an inside job. When we can really grasp this or know this, it changes how we experience everything. The consciousness that we are is not just the way we think, it's also the degree to which we have discovered and released our own hidden magnificence and come to be in the flow. Butterworth tells us that this subtle distinction becomes dramatic when we realize that no matter what level of consciousness we may be in at any given moment, there's always more within, the allness of God within. He explains that we may be in the consciousness of illness, of lack, or disharmony, or injustice, and yet where we are, we can be still and acknowledge oneness with the creative process. And as John, the New Testament writer, states, but out of his heart shall flow rivers of living water. Our consent to allow this healing flow will determine our reality. Just as the wave in the ocean, just as the wave in the ocean, there's no outside influence that will determine our reality. Unless, of course, you're a wave on a lake, then the wind might have a little bit to do with your action. But we cannot make divine law work for us or for anyone else. We cannot make the law of gravity work for us. We cannot make the sun shine on us. All we can or need to do is just to get in right relationship with them. Divine law is always working, even if we may be frustrating its flow through our attitudes or actions. We are always in its flow, just as we are always in gravity, and it is always in us. We may just get out of the awareness of the flow. When the mind stays on the thought of wholeness, we are synchronized with the flow of life. When we think abundance, we're in line with the flow of abundance. When we think health, we're synchronized with the flow of health. We don't create it, and we don't start or stop the flow. We simply accept it or give our permission to its natural existence. This is what the presence of God really is. The life of God present in us as an unchangeable flow. When I read in the flow of life the first time, I got it. I understood it on a really deep heart level, and everything in my life changed. It was amazing. I could only feel the flow of divine providence in me, and I was constantly in awe how calm I was and centered and peaceful. I felt no matter what was occurring in my current reality, I was always calm. My mind was still, my emotions steady, and my body was pain-free. Then, as if the butt of some sick joke, everything returned to my old normal. I had no idea what had happened at the time, but now I realized that what had changed was that I withdrew my permission to allow the flow, the natural flow. So I got back into my head, which is really dangerous for me. The flow was still there because it never stops, but I just decided to ignore it and go back to figuring things out on my own. Once I experienced what it felt like to be in the flow, my return to doing things my way was hell. Everything went wrong on steroids. It was ridiculous. Everything in my life began to scream at me. I experienced a health crisis, a financial crisis, and an emotional crisis. The gift was that it was not subtle. I had to listen. Have you ever noticed when you're trying to make something happen, everything about you tightens up? It's like an instant resistance to life. Because by God, I'm going to make this happen, whatever it is, right? It could be even something as simple as getting somewhere on time. But it's like we call all of our forces out because we're pushing against the world. The second you think things aren't going your way, you go into fight or flight mode. Resistance or avoidance. And neither one of these is trusting the flow. Surrendering to divine will in the situation is. When I had faith in the flow, I knew that I would always have what I required and desired. I knew I would be led to the right decisions about my finances and that my supply would never end. When I had faith in the flow, I knew that I was in the right place at the right time because that's where I was. No questions. When I had faith in the flow, my body didn't hold tension and everything flowed and moved easily. I was guided to eat what my body desired. I moved when my body asked me to. When I had faith in the flow, I knew that my loved ones were part of the flow. And as long as I was in the flow, they had a better chance of recognizing it and trusting it. My journey, and all of our journeys, should lead us back to ourselves. Not our egoic selves, but to our true selves. To the natural flow of the divine that we are. The flow that never stops, never changes course, regardless of how often we get distracted. It is simple but not easy, because there's a part of us where unhealed emotional wounds reside. Old patterning holds firm, and messages that we have picked up along the way are leading our way. We have to trust in something unseen and maybe unwitnessed. We have to surrender our willfulness in doing things our way, and we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and different, if only temporarily. We are all about instant gratification. The status quo, and the social norm. We hold on to old beliefs that don't serve us because they just happen to be family traditions as well. We go with the crowd instead of going with the flow. We want easy and evolution. We want our way and God's way. We want to hold on to what we think we know to be right and be able to float into the mystery. Our ego does not want us to float. It wants us to struggle because that's what gives it life. If we were in the flow of life, ego would drown. The instant we turn our awareness to the inner flow of the divine, as us, the ego is annihilated. Because ego cannot be in the present moment where the divine resides. There's no struggle, there's no warring, there's no confusion. Just the bliss of floating on the divine stream as it moves through our experience. So I want to invite you to close your eyes a minute, if it's comfortable. Close your eyes and just arrange your body in its most natural, comfortable way. Bless you. And with the attention that you've been focusing on my voice and words, I invite you to focus that awareness on your breath. Just notice it. Without changing or altering your natural breath in any way, just notice how it moves in and out of your body. Notice how your body responds in a wave-like motion as the breath moves in and out, an ever so gentle wave. Begin to notice that you are indeed the wave, gently expressing yourself as your chest or abdomen rises and falls. Each swell taking you deeper into a relaxed and aware state. And as your body releases its tension, begin to allow the breath to slow down and to deepen. Gently riding the wave of the breath. Your very existence is this movement of breath. Your perfection lies within its every wave. This is the source of the flow of life. You are the flow of life. This flow never stops, as your breath never stops. It supplies you with every need you have the moment you need it. Within this breath is perfect health, lavish abundance, and complete right relationships. All that is, all that will ever be, all that is you now. Bathe in this perfection of presence that you are. knowing that the divine flow is in all, around all. It is the breath. It is the essence of life within you and is available to tap into, to allow, to open up to its flow. To merrily, easily let life take you. As you bring your awareness back to your body and the chair you're sitting in, keep the awareness on the breath as the universal life force flowing through you. And as you open your eyes when you're ready, just keep that deep stillness, like the bottom of the ocean. Just keep that awareness with you. As you go through your day, you can carry this with you. As you come back into the room, namaste. Thank you.